Tonight, Melbourne's wild weather wreaking havoc. A boy rescued as more rain hits and snow in spring. The latest live.
Key charges dropped. A legal shock on the Eastern Freeway police tragedy.
One man dead, one fighting for life after a late night shootout.
Traffic chaos as tragedy strikes on the roads.
Dan Andrews under fire as another minister quit 28 days from the election.
And Melbourne's $50 million Powerball winner.
Live from Melbourne, 7 News with Rebecca Madden and Mike Amor.
Good evening. Victoria's wild weather has struck again, bringing flash flooding, spring snowfalls and even flood evacuation orders in the suburbs of Melbourne.
The east and north have been lashed by heavy rain as the state closes in on its wettest October on record.
1 minute, Jake Gilbert was riding his bike in Altona Meadows. The next, he was fighting for survival in a stormwater drain.
I tried to get out, and then when I was getting pulled, I was just sort of thinking, like, sort of goodbye and whatnot.
The force of the current pulled him under through 10 metres of drain. He struggled to get his head above water until police and SES happened to pass by.
One stage he asked if he was going to make it. I said, yeah, you're going to make it, mate. It's all good. Just hold on tight.
It's flooding that's drenched every corner of the city in the last 24 hours.
We have had a low pressure system sitting to the south of the state, and that's been quite stubborn and sitting there in place over the last few days.
In Healesville, River Street lived up to its name. Occupants at 11 properties there, including the bowling club, now advised to move to higher ground.
The flooding is the worst I think I've ever seen it this year. It's unusual.
But the wet wasn't localised to the east. At Essendon train station, commuters were forced to brave knee-high water to reach the platforms. In Glen Ira, a water main burst, while on the peninsula, unruly swells smashed this boat into the rocks. In West Gippsland, the Thomson Reservoir reached capacity for the first time in 25 years, flowing over into the spillway. And just 3 days out from November, a dusting of white in our Alpine region.
The forecast is pretty exciting for this time of year, and it looks like we're going to have snow. I reckon Melbourne Cup's going to be interesting up here.
Mount Buller received 100 millimetres of rain overnight, droplets turning to snowflakes. While not enough to ski, there's still time yet.
This is forecast. Looks like we're going to get quite a lot of snow. It's certainly more than we're used to at this time of year when we're normally looking forward to summer activities.
The last time Victoria recorded this much rain in October was in 2010 during the last La Nina. But the record will almost certainly fall, with heavy downpours forecast for nearly every day next week.
We'll start to see temperatures fall across Victoria on Tuesday and Wednesday, potentially 8 to 16 degrees below average.
Jodie Lee, 7 News.
OK, for more, let's go to meteorologist Jane Bunn. And Jane, is there any reprieve in sight?
Well, Mike, we have had a long run of this wet weather, and today there was no more humidity, so the wind was cold too, as these showers streamed in through the Melbourne area, tending to steady rain at times. The wind made it feel like the temperature was down in the single digits. So that's a day that is not out of place in midwinter. Coats are back on. The city is now just 0.4 of a millimetre away from its wettest October in nearly 50 years. But there is a break on the way. We'll actually get to enjoy some warmth and sunshine. I'll show you when to expect that later in the bulletin, Mike.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jane.
There's been a shock twist in the Eastern Freeway tragedy, with key charges dropped over the death of 4 police officers. A trucking company boss was facing 4 counts of manslaughter, but has been cleared without explanation.
Another step back for the families of the fallen 4 killed in the Eastern Freeway crash. All manslaughter charges against trucking company boss Simon Tutiru were dropped today on the eve of his Supreme Court trial. It was alleged Tutiru allowed his driver Mohinder Singh to get behind the wheel while sleep deprived and drug affected. On the day, 4 Victorian police officers were mown down in April 2020. The prosecution refused to provide an explanation for the sudden change of heart, the officers' heartbroken families left frustrated. Yet again, our 4 loved ones are slowly being failed by the legal system. All need to be accountable for their actions on and leading up to the day my partner lost his life. We feel that the complexities of Victoria's legal system are somewhat at odds with public expectation. Tuteru had planned to fight the initial charges, pleading not guilty. His lawyer told the court he always believed the prosecution's manslaughter case was weak. Other serious charges relating to heavy vehicle law remain in place.
If for an individual, you can get jail time of up to 5 years, or if you're a corporation, around $3.5 million in penalties.
Infamous Porsche driver Richard Pusey also faced court today. He initially refused to leave his cell or get dressed, transported to court naked. Rochelle Brown, 7 News.
The Hume Highway has been brought to a standstill after a fatal motorcycle crash involving a Christian biker club. Sarah Jones joins us now. And Sarah, they were travelling in a large group.
They were, Mike. They'd reached Wandong around 1 this afternoon when tragedy struck. 4 members of the God Squad Christian MC are believed to have collided. One who's yet to be formally identified died at the scene. Melbourne-bound lanes on the Hume Freeway between Wandong and Wallan have been closed for hours, causing chaos. Emergency services have had to direct traffic off the freeway and onto Wandong Road. Police say they're still investigating how it all unfolded. The group was celebrating 50 years in Melbourne. The 3 other riders in the crash were taken to the Northern Hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Mike?
Sarah, thank you.
1 man has been killed and another seriously injured in a shootout at a rural property in Beechworth. Police have ruled out any gang links, saying this was a simple case of bad blood.
The fatal final fight in a long-running feud. 61-year-old Paul Flegel, a visitor to this secluded house at Beechworth, shot dead in the front yard.
We believe that this is an isolated incident, certainly not a random incident. The parties were known to each other.
The 60-year-old resident was also shot, found bleeding in a back shed by police who arrived cautiously, given a gunfight had erupted just before 9 last night. He was flown to the Alfred Hospital. Detectives today at his home in Beechworth, where he used to run the town's antique shop. And at the crime scene, a sign in a shed with an emblem used by white nationalists reading White Pride.
There's multiple windows that are broken, and that forms part of the investigation into the circumstances.
Detectives wouldn't reveal if either man had criminal histories, but dismissed any links to motorcycle gangs. Despite a gunshot wound to his chest, the surviving man managed to call 000. He was still conscious when officers arrived and spoke with them about what happened.
I can assure you that it is our priority to resolve this.
The weapons used have not been found. Paul Dowsley, 7 News.
Firefighters are turning up the political heat on the Premier, transforming more than 100 fire trucks into mobile anti-Dan billboards. They're demanding a pay rise and new firefighting vehicles, warning lives are at risk.
It's a tactic Daniel Andrews once proudly supported.
Another day, another story that defines the crisis in our ambulance service.
But now the United Firefighters Union has turned the hose on the Premier, painting 125 fire trucks with anti-Dan slogans.
This government has turned their back on firefighters. It's the most disrespectful action, and can I say a betrayal of people who forego quantity and quality of life in protecting the community.
The union says it had no choice after the state government refused to meet with them or negotiate their demands.
We've got 15 fire trucks that are out of date, should be off the road. One of those trucks was built in 1995.
And as well as calls for a yearly 8.6% pay rise.
Our training college is at 121% capacity. There is nowhere to train. Plus we have no trench rescue capacity.
Our fire services have never been better equipped than they are right now. Our government has invested unprecedented funding.
Away from the firefight, the Andrews government is fighting to hang on to senior MPs. Today, Minister Jala Pulford announced she's walking away from politics, the 8th minister to do so in recent months.
We work to encourage and support one another and to ensure that we've always got members ready to step into the breach.
In recent times, Minister Pulford has spoken publicly about the loss of her 13-year-old daughter to cancer. She plans on spending more time with family. Chanel Vella, 7 News.
Brittany Higgins has triggered calls for a major overhaul of our judicial system after her emotional speech outside court. She could still be charged with contempt, but the juror responsible for the collapse of the Parliament House rape trial will escape punishment, despite the astronomical cost to taxpayers.
The devastating collapse of the Larriman Higgins case yesterday saw the judge declare no juror would be punished. But from legal experts,
I think that's wrong and I think they should be charged. I think it's important to send a message.
The high-profile rape case had to be aborted after a court sheriff accidentally discovered a juror was conducting their own research into the case. The proceedings likely to have cost $2 million so far, and tonight calls for someone to be held accountable.
I think those charges would be successful.
That, as Chief Justice McCallum also confirmed, it wasn't just one article found in the jury room. I was informed by the sheriff's officers that the same juror was also in possession of 2 additional academic articles on the topic of sexual assault. One top legal mind says it's time to entirely overhaul trials by jury.
It's a relic of an ancient system.
QC and former WA Governor Malcolm McCusker argues a judge-alone trial is twice as fast, never faces a hung verdict, and unlike juries, judges give detailed reasons for their judgments.
It would not be difficult for the state, each state, to change the system.
The ACT Attorney General revealed to 7 News today they were aware of the community commentary on the jury issue and were considering it carefully. The Prime Minister was also asked about it today but refused to enter the debate.
I don't intend to comment on that matter.
While calls for Brittany Higgins to be punished for her comments yesterday have been dismissed by some.
I just don't think it's that prejudicial.
Chris Reason, 7 News.
Australian former wives and children of Islamic State fighters are a step closer to returning home. 4 families have been taken from a camp in Syria to Iraq, where they will remain before being flown to Australia.
My government will always act to keep Australians safe.
The families will be under strict surveillance when they return.
In a dramatic move by the US, the Pentagon has flagged the possibility of ramping up its nuclear arsenal in the Pacific. But critics fear the move could easily backfire and antagonise Beijing.
High-level talks in Washington, warning of trouble at home.
We've updated our posture in the Indo-Pacific to make it more survivable against aggression.
The Pentagon revealing it will invest in new nuclear forces capable of being deployed for use in our region, but not on our soil.
Some $34 billion to sustain and modernize our nuclear forces.
Australia really is at the forefront of that US-led effort to provide a credible military counterbalance to China.
It comes a year on from the former Morrison government's AUKUS agreement with the US and UK, allowing Australia access to high-tech weaponry and nuclear-powered submarines.
It is a partnership which is about our values, our common commitment to democracy, to human rights.
There is deep concern about China's growing military might and its expansive ambitions.
And China's not the only threat. In a speech overnight, Russian President Vladimir Putin accused the West of dominating world affairs and nuclear blackmail.
Ahead is probably the most dangerous, unpredictable and at the same time important decade since the end of the Second World War.
A threat likely to dominate discussions when leaders meet at the G20 in Bali next month. Rachel Baxter, 7 News.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has finally completed his takeover of Twitter. Musk spent 6 months on the $60 billion acquisition, but got straight to work after taking over. He's already sacked the CEO, Chief Financial Officer and General Counsel. The policy chief responsible for banning former President Donald Trump from the platform was also fired.
There is a chance that one of the first things he'd like to do is bring back everybody that was banned or bring back everybody that was controversial.
Musk has also changed his Twitter handle to Chief Twit.
A Melbourne man is $53 million richer after taking out a share of last night's record-breaking Powerball jackpot.
The grandfather from Clyde in the southeastern suburbs was one of three to split the $160 million prize.
The chances of winning were 1 in 134 million.
$160 million.
But somewhere nearby, one mystery grandfather has beaten the odds.
Immediate retirement. He said he's never going back to work.
There's no need for his blue-collar job anymore after the lucky man from Clyde pocketed more than $53 million in last night's record-breaking Powerball. As for how he plans to spend it...
It wasn't a house, it wasn't a boat, it wasn't one of those big-ticket items. It was the fact that he wanted to buy a puppy for his grandson.
His ticket, a quick pick, bought online.
And it was really good this morning to think, oh, maybe I sold that ticket. And then when he found out it was internet, we were like, oh, but it was a great day.
Around town today, spirits were high.
I'll have a beer with you, mate, just to celebrate it. Well done, legend.
Local luck keeping dreams alive. Two other winners will bank an equal share in the jackpot, one an unregistered ticket holder from Western Australia, the other a Sydney father who cried when he found out, admitting times have been tough and the money will buy a home for his family.
He told all of his friends, I think I've won Division 1 in Powerball. No one believed him until he checked his entry and called us.
It wasn't just about the big winners last night. Many lucky ticket holders from other divisions will also share in $117 million. So worth checking your numbers if you haven't already.
I might buy an island next time.
Christy Mayer, 7 News.
Yeah, always next time. The blockbuster crowd is gathering at the MCG. Tim Watson, it's all or nothing for Australia tonight.
That's right, Beck. The Aussies World Cup defence goes on the line against the old enemy. Live to Mitch Cleary. And Mitch, this is the biggest T20 ever on home soil for Australia.
Well, Tim, it's must win for the Aussies if there to be any chance of progressing through to the semi-finals. The big watch is on team selection, and it appears that keeper Matthew Wade will play despite testing positive to COVID just Wednesday night. Now, he was driven here to the MCG a short time ago in a separate car wearing a mask and will have his own change room away from teammates, but is allowed to play under ICC rules. Around 50,000 fans are expected here for what will be Australia's first game in front of the renamed Shane Warne stand. The earlier game between Afghanistan and Ireland already called off. The toss for tonight set to be delayed. I'll be back in sport with what that rain means for the start time for the Aussies must-win clash. Tim?
Thanks, Mitch. Coming up shortly, how the Cats plan to show off their shiny new toy, but who replaces Joel Selwood at the top? Also, the Bombers have some captaincy questions of their own, how one contender has already made one Bomber dream come true, and another superstar jockey looks set to join Damien Oliver watching the Melbourne Cup from the stands. We'll explain why shortly.
OK, thanks, Tim. See you soon. A grieving father has unleashed on the killer who attacked his son and left him to die. His message to a murderer next on 7 News.
Plus, the battle to stop power prices from jumping 50%.
A breakthrough after a cruel attack on a family's puppy.
Heart-stopping moments as a truck sets off a destructive chain reaction.
And later, special reports. What's behind a spike in skin problems and the big firm offering big pay packets to young workers.
Police have arrested 3 men over break-ins that left an elderly woman terrified and a family's puppy badly injured. Police allege the trio broke into 2 properties and stole dirt bikes. The woman wasn't hurt, but the 3-month-old Labrador was found in a bad way and is now being treated for life-threatening injuries. Investigators are still trying to determine how the puppy was hurt.
A grieving father has sent a blunt message to the man who attacked his son and left him to die. Michael Smith opened up to 7 News, saying he wants the 21-year-old killer to know what he thinks of him.
A killer in handcuffs and a dad beset by grief. Michael Smith today unleashing on his son's murderer at a pre-sentence hearing in the Supreme Court.
He's a gutless coward. And he's a stain on our society. And I want him to know that from us.
Cameron Smith was on his way to watch the sunset in Seaford when he crossed paths with Jack Ledlin in 2020.
An argument broke out before Ledlin stabbed Smith in the heart. The 26-year-old tradie left to die as Ledlin ran off. The 21-year-old was found guilty of murder last month. Today, his lawyer described his upbringing as dysfunctional, saying Ledlin was neglected by his parents and had started using drugs at age 10.
Is that Cameron's fault? And that's not an excuse to do what has been done.
Jack Ledlin's legal team have asked the sentencing judge to take the killer's youth into account. But his victim's parents say their son's age should also be considered because he too was a young man with his whole life ahead of him.
To us, he's got another 50 years of life and he'll never get to have that.
Ledlin will be sentenced in the coming weeks. Estelle Greeping, 7 News.
Australia's gas suppliers are being accused of gouging families at a time when they're being crushed by the rising cost of living. There is some hope of containing power bills, with the nation's energy ministers looking to put a cap on how much companies can charge.
Despite appearances, Chris Bowen says the country's energy ministers are all in line.
The Australian people need to know that we are one team on their side, ensuring that they are not paying any more for energy than they need to.
Warning energy producers all options are on the table to drive down electricity prices, predicted to rise by 56% over the next year, and gas by 40%, promising
stronger action on stronger regulation as a matter of urgency.
One option, giving the ACCC much tougher regulatory powers on pricing and for the federal government to step in when prices spike.
And force gas producers to supply gas at a particular price into the domestic market.
Gas prices have jumped from $10 a gigajoule last year to as high as $35 this year, despite the cost of production remaining stable.
Gas producers are profiteering. They're making significant obscene profits.
One way to prevent that continuing...
We've actually proposed a $10 price cap. Now, at a $10 price cap, most suppliers would be still making it close to 100% markup.
Tough talk from the ministers, but no action yet. Chris Bowen says that will come, but will take time to have effect, meaning those price rises will continue.
If the government has some secret package that they're about to roll out, I'd love to see it.
Peter Dutton recommitting to examining nuclear power in his budget reply speech.
I think it's important for us to have an intelligent debate.
Oh, I'm happy to have a debate about nuclear energy. The most expensive new form of energy you could possibly imagine.
Suggesting it would be a brief debate. Mark Riley, 7 News.
An inattentive truck driver has caused a major crash in Sydney's west. The rig ploughed in the back of one car, which had stopped at traffic lights. That caused a chain reaction, sending multiple vehicles ploughing into the car in front. 5 cars were caught up in the chaos.
The Royal Mint has started production on the first British coins to feature King Charles. It's a 50p piece that bears his face with a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II on the reverse side.
So for 70 years we've been striking the coins of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and today we are striking the first circulating coins of King Charles III.
9.6 million of the coins will be made. Our embattled hospital has thrown up a damning new statistic with a 1,000% jump in the number of sick Victorians left waiting in an emergency department for more than a day.
Also ahead on 7 News, the pensioner's nightmare as a thief breaks in through the roof in the middle of the night.
Art rage. Protesters target one of the world's most famous paintings.
And Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg takes a $150 billion hit. Hospital emergency room delays have blown out dramatically, with new figures revealing a 1,000% jump in waits of more than 24 hours. And there's more bad news for our strained health system. We're being warned there's another COVID wave on the way.
The data is in and the diagnosis is not good. Emergency room treatment times are blowing out badly.
Obviously, this is challenging, but I want to assure Victorians that a person in ED is being well cared for.
More than 3,600 patients stayed in ED longer than 24 hours. At the same time last year, that number was just 270, a 1,200% increase.
We've had real challenges in our public health services discharging people who are waiting on an NDIS plan to be signed off, or discharging people who are waiting on suitable aged care.
Everything flows into everything else. It's a very complex situation, but I reassure you that we're trying our hardest to find our way through.
The elective surgery wait list has reduced by 2,000 and 74% of patients are being treated in the recommended time. But another COVID wave is on the way. More than 8,000 cases were reported in the last week. That's a rise of almost 25%.
There's been an increase in the presentation of prescriptions for COVID antivirals recently.
Numbers are expected to keep rising for weeks, the peak in December.
Looking at the COVID numbers coming out from the Department of Health today, there's been an increase in the number of COVID cases anyway. So you would expect with that an increase in hospitalisations and death. It's not fantastic, but it's something that we're ready for.
Chanel Bella, 7 News.
Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg has seen his wealth plummet more than any other billionaire over the past year, losing 155 billion Australian dollars. The loss comes as Facebook's parent company Meta announces its profits have fallen by more than half. It's the second consecutive quarterly drop, sending shares in the company plummeting. It's not all bad news, though. The 38-year-old still has a net worth of $58.7 billion.
Protesters have taken aim at another priceless artwork, this time in The Hague. One climate demonstrator glued his head to the girl with a pearl earring painting, while another attached his hand to the wall.
How do you feel when you see something beautiful and priceless being apparently destroyed before your eyes?
Obscene. Oh no. Shame on you.
The piece was protected by glass and undamaged during the protest.
Prince Harry's made a major statement revealing the title of his upcoming memoir is Spare. It's a provocative play on the adage, the heir and the spare. The publisher is promising it will be raw, unflinching honesty, covering his public childhood, the impact of his mother's death and reasons for moving to the United States. The book is part of a 3-book deal that will pocket the royal $62 million. It will be released on January the 10th.
An Australian woman's lifelong search for her biological parents has led her to a whole other family. She met her siblings on the other side of the world, thanks to an at-home DNA test.
After a long walk through an airport terminal,
We got you.
hugs and kisses after decades apart.
We felt like we'd known each other forever.
Susie Fraser spent her life searching and hoping for this, meeting siblings she had a feeling existed a world away.
I always felt my chain was never complete.
The 64-year-old was put up for adoption at birth, but she always had an urge to find her biological family. In 1991, our laws changed, allowing her to meet her mother and learn her father's name.
Raymond Bond. We searched and we searched, but we could never find it.
Having known that Susie had searched for so long, I didn't want to give up for her.
Tim bought a MyHeritage DNA test for Susie in 2018.
It came up with a perfect match to Colin Barlow of Gibraltar.
Her cousin, who revealed her family tree and startling similarities.
He sent me back a photo of a girl called Susie. I had a sister who died at 19.
Her 3 other siblings were living in England.
It was a huge shock, but I never doubted it.
For 4 years they've been chatting online. Now they've finally met in person.
We've just returned from the most wonderful 9 days of getting to know one another.
The Bond family have really realised that Susie is a Bond.
A Bond by name and by nature. Georgia Holland, 7 News.
Well, Halloween has arrived early in Melbourne. Ripponlea Estate on Elm Street has been transformed into a house of horrors for a nightmarish family weekend.
Kids, friends, family can expect to have a little bit of fun in the Coach House in Ripponlea. There's fairy floss, there are face painting, there is cupcake decorating and colouring contests for kids.
Well, the free event opens at midday tomorrow and runs until Monday.
There's been a spike in skin problems. Up next on 7 News, the reason you might be itching more than usual.
Plus, a former AFL star on the wrong side of the law.
A home invasion nightmare as an intruder drops in.
And later, after sport, why a leading employer is headhunting young workers without university degrees for jobs paying up to $150,000. Former Adelaide Crows star Jared Petrenko has faced court charged with domestic violence offences. The 32-year-old is accused of assaulting his partner in Adelaide earlier this year. The brief hearing was held in a closed court. The case is due before a magistrate again next month.
An elderly Yarraville couple is in shock after a bizarre daylight home invasion. A would-be thief fell through their roof, then apologised profusely before running off.
For Bev and Colin, not a break-in, rather a fall-in.
What did you see?
Pair of legs coming out the roof.
They'd heard a commotion above their living room before they saw a man drop to the floor right at their feet.
And I think he got a hell of a shock to see us, and like we got a shock to see him.
Colin's reaction?
What the bloody hell are you doing?
The intruder's response?
Oh, sorry. Off.
Clearly in a panic, the man in his 40s ran out the door, across the landing, down the driveway, through the lawn area here, and the last Bev and Colin saw of him, he jumped over the fence and sprinted down their street. Police are investigating. Nothing was stolen. The couple left with a big hole and an even bigger mystery.
This frightened me, and I wonder what the bloody hell he is doing, but maybe we'll never find out. Just to think that someone was intruding into our home.
Nick McCallum, 7 News.
Taking a look at finance now, the ASX 200 has closed the day down 59 points, but still finished the week up 1.6%. Miners were hardest hit after iron ore prices plunged to their lowest point in 2 years. One Australian dollar is currently buying 64.19 US cents.
A star Premier League footballer is in hospital after a mass stabbing attack at a supermarket in Milan. A cashier was killed and Arsenal defender Pablo Mari was among 5 people injured. Customers detained the 46-year-old suspect until police arrived. Mari's club management has since confirmed he wasn't seriously hurt.
As if it's not causing enough trouble, the unrelenting wet weather is being blamed for an extra problem, a spike in skin disease. It's an unwanted problem for the 500,000 Australians living with psoriasis.
Jason Owen has never backed away from the big stage. Runner-up on X Factor 10 years ago, the country singer has toured ever since. But these days, the 28-year-old struggles to get out of bed.
I found myself, staying at home a lot, not wanting to be seen, cancelling shows.
The young father suffers from a chronic case of psoriasis, a painful, itchy skin disease all over his body.
I found myself having to cover up. I found myself being bullied because of it, because it's not a pretty thing to look at.
Cold, wet weather inflames it. La Niña hasn't helped. Dermatologists say ideal humidity levels should be 30 to 50%, but recently they've been as high as 80%.
Psoriasis is well known to flare particularly in winter, so 90% of people, their psoriasis is worse in winter.
It's incurable, but it is treatable.
Even the more severe types, we have great options with injections, and tablets can work really well.
The physical fight is one aspect of the disease. The mental battle is often untold of. A global report has found a quarter of people living with psoriasis show signs of depression, and almost half experience anxiety disorder.
One of the things about psoriasis is people hide it very well. So a lot more people
habit than you would suspect.
Tomorrow is World Psoriasis Day, raising awareness and support for those who suffer. Bill Hogan, 7 News.
Sport is next with Tim Watson. And Tim, it is crunch time for Aaron Finch and the Aussies tonight.
Beck, it's simple. Beat England or their T20 World Cup defence will be in tatters. We'll cross live to the MCG next with the latest on rain and COVID curveballs. Also, fresh details on a captaincy call for the reigning premiers as a star bomber reveals his wish list, why another superstar jockey is without a Melbourne Cup ride, and what's got an NBA superstar fired up. Welcome back. Rain is already having an impact on Australia's must-win World Cup clash against England. Returning to Mitch Cleary, and Mitch, the clock is ticking at the MCG.
Well, Tim, all eyes are on the sky from here as the rain continues to pick up at the MCG. The 7 p.m. start time has already been delayed. 7:30 p.m. the officials will be out on the wicket inspecting the surface to see if there's any chance of getting on. In the hope of the rain avoiding, they have until 9:46 tonight to toss the coin before the match is abandoned. Skipper Aaron Finch back on home turf in the hope of reigniting his tournament. Keeper Matthew Wade is here in his own change room and is set to play despite COVID. Spinner Adam Zampa also back after missing this week with COVID of his own. Last night, Zimbabwe stunning Pakistan. This tournament of upsets continuing. It effectively ends Pakistan's tournament. Zimbabwe winning off the last ball by 1 run. Tim, Zimbabwe now daring to dream of what would be a remarkable semi-final berth. Tim?
Thanks, Mitch. Essendon leader Zach Merritt has pushed back against claims Bombers players aren't fit enough. A recent coffee with new coach Brad Scott has the star midfielder ready to change the narrative at Tullamarine.
Leadership was a major issue identified in Essendon's external review. Zach Merritt putting his hand up to become captain.
If it was the role for me, I'd absolutely love to take it, but I've also loved supporting Dyson for 6 years now.
The review also found players aren't fit enough or working hard enough. Merritt backing their current program.
For me, it's not a big issue. I get that it's a part of the review and some pretty strong feedback that we aren't fit enough, but I've got no doubt as well that we'll fix that up pretty quickly. If we get our game plan neater and actually aligned and play in a very similar way to each other, the running stuff will be fine.
The star midfielder coming in from leave to help Make-A-Wish Australia, giving 9-year-old Edward and his brother Henry a personal tour of the hangar. The Premiers won't appoint a new captain until post-Christmas.
Players will discuss that, coaches will discuss it, there'll be a recommendation put through to the executive team and then through to the board, but we'll take our time with it.
Patrick Dangerfield at 32 has a certain romance about it. Tom Stewart considered favourite if the Cats go slightly younger.
I'm sure amongst the playing group they're probably talking about it as well, because we're dismounting from the all-time greatest club captain ever.
Geelong taking the Premiership Cup on a 2-week tour.
It actually launches at our AFLW game tomorrow night here at GMHBA Stadium.
Tom Brown, 7 News.
Superstar jockey James McDonald has joined Damien Oliver without a ride for the Melbourne Cup after another shock scratching. The German-trained Loft failed a vet check at Werribee this morning, with the second favourite for the race ruled out. One of the greatest hoops of all time has touched down in Sydney for tomorrow's $10 million Golden Eagle. Frankie Dettori will ride Wellwall, trained by Chris Waller.
A race is a race. If you can race on the moon, it'll still be a race. People are really waking up to the idea that it's money to be made there if you got a decent horse.
That is such a boost to the meeting and to the Golden Eagle itself.
Jamie Carr will skip Derby Day to ride at Rosehill tomorrow. Dettori will stay in Sydney for Cup Day. The Stars and Renegades will be hoping the rain stays away in Ballarat tomorrow for their first match in Victoria in 1,000 days.
There's always a bit of spice in it. To be able to do it, in Victoria again, it just makes sense again. Especially that we're against the Gades, the Melbourne rivalry is well and truly alive. So yeah, we're very, very keen.
Both sides are desperate for a win to climb off the bottom of the WBBL table. After 3 years away, the Supercars made their long-awaited return to the Gold Coast today. The street circuit caused plenty of problems throughout the day, with a number of drivers finding trouble. Will Davison is the early pace setter. Both races are live and free on 7 this weekend, and the scoring struggles continued for Aussie Ben Simmons, who failed to make any contact with the rim with this attempt from close range. Simmons did have more luck in defence.
Simmons the steal. Simmons looks for Durant.
That sent Brooklyn's game against Dallas into overtime, but Luka Doncic and the Mavs claimed a 129-125 win. Steph Curry impressed even himself with this three-point play as the Warriors beat the Miami Heat. He's done that a few times.
Hasn't he just?
Yes, hasn't he, the three-point play? That's sport.
Thank you very much, Tim. Well, the skills shortage has led one national firm to headhunt recruits straight out of high school.
KPMG says it's been so successful the company plans to expand the program nationwide.
Meet the youngest employees of one of the world's biggest and most prestigious businesses, KPMG. Lance Woodgate is 18 years old, fresh out of high school. Like his colleagues here, Lance decided against university.
But I have obviously the invaluable experience of working at KPMG, learning on the job and a lot more of the professional skills.
In an industry starved of young, skilled workers, KPMG's Richard Marrison found a loophole.
We actually worked with the schools themselves to say, okay, well, do you have any, really smart young people coming through that are looking for a different kind of pathway that aren't going to go to university?
By the time these new tech recruits complete a 3-year learn-on-the-job program, they too, like their university graduate peers, will be on the way to big pay packets. An average JavaScript developer earns close to $150,000, a data modeller almost $160,000, while an IT security advisor earns more than $165,000 a year.
Six-figure salary. The opportunity to have that, it's definitely one of the reasons that I joined KPMG.
At the moment, there are 10 KPMG trainees who come here to TAFE once a week to learn more about what they're doing at work. KPMG says it's been so successful that it wants to expand the program into other offices around the country in the coming years.
We'll take it national as soon as we're able. That's certainly the intent.
Tom Saker, 7 News.
Jane Bunn returns now. And Jane, I think we all want to know, what can we expect this weekend?
Well, Mike, it's not as dreary as today, and one of the days actually brings warmth and sunshine. I'll have the full details on that next. Hello again. Now, if you're wondering when the rain will end, we are nearly at our next break. There is a bit more wet weather tomorrow, but by Sunday morning, it's all about the warmth and sunshine. Today was cold. We briefly reached 15.6, but for much of the time, it was just 13. All these showers spread across Melbourne for yet another day, tending to steady rain at times. The wind was enough to drag a boat off its moorings in Mornington, and that wind is the feature out there today. We no longer have high humidity, so if you're in the wind, the temperature feels like it's only in the single digits. Now, these showers are likely to ease tonight. You can already see them breaking up. In the last 20 minutes, something interesting happened in the city. Our total so far this month bypassed what we had in 2010. It is now the wettest October since 1975. That's the 5th wettest since records began. Victoria as a whole is on track to have our #1 wettest October on record. Today, the northwest is in a break, but showers continue to stream across the southern ranges and up onto the northern plains. That cold wind means it is chilly enough for snow in the Alps at times. The culprit for today's weather is a low near Tasmania that's dragging a cold front over Victoria. From here, I have some good news and some not so good news. The good news part is that a high pressure system that'll move in across the weekend. So tomorrow has some showers, yes, but the dry breaks are much longer than we had today. Then Sunday is great. It is warm with bright sunshine. But then the next rain system does move through. This one is mainly over northern and far western Victoria. Then next week's race days are just like today. They're chilly, wet and windy. We've got another cold outbreak on the way. That upcoming activity puts much of the state back on flood watch. Rivers may rise again from the next rain that is due later Sunday into Monday. Around the nation tomorrow, much of the east is in a dry break as the wet weather activity ramps up over in the west. That there is the beginning of our next rain. To Victoria, showers continue over the southern ranges, but the activity, it's more isolated, a lot less than we saw out there today. Cool, meaning it's a slight step up from what we had this afternoon. Closer in, there are showers passing through, but not as many as today, and it's not as chilly either. The showers are most likely here in the afternoon. They'll ease again at night. For Derby Day, I'd expect it to be generally dry in the morning, but the showers pick up again for the afternoon as the breezy wind ruffles the hats. Now, despite that, sunscreen is needed between 9:30am and 4:30pm. In the 8-day outlook, Sunday, great, that's our break. Make the most of the warmth and sunshine, back up to 21. On Monday, we're going to see some rain at night into Monday morning. It's only light, increasing then on Monday night, and that's our next cold outbreak. Now, Cup Day, 14, that's likely to be the coldest since 1995. 17 tomorrow, not as wet, still some showers. I'd expect most of those in the afternoon.
OK, thanks, Jane. And that's 7 News for this Friday, the 28th of October. We'll have updates throughout the night.
Yeah, for now, from the 7 News team, take care. Good night.